their homework is check all of your personal care products, check everything that goes on your body. If you wouldn't put it in your mouth, don't put it on your body. Women's makeup is not regulated the way it should be, in my opinion, and we're unknowingly exposing ourselves to a lot of things that we don't need to be. There's only so much you can control in your environment. So when you're in your home, fill your home with plants that clear the air. Take off your shoes before you walk through your house. That's the number one way we track things into our home. And then take care of all your cleaning supplies. I've had patients who have had like chronic allergies, sinusitis, like these chronic conditions, and we just clean up their environment. Get rid of the carpet, make sure that you've got a HEPA filter, get plants in your house, which PS, having plants in your house has been shown to lower your blood pressure and stress response. So
Hey folks, it's Mike Mutzel here with HighIntensityHealth.com. Thanks so much for tuning in to episode number 105. And today we're live with Dr. Jolene Brighten. She's a naturopathic physician. She went to naturopathic medical school at National College of Naturopathic Medicine in Portland. She currently practices in Oakland, California, and she's actually on vacation now on the Central Coast. So she's actually doing this from her friend's house, which is really cool, Dr. Brighten. So today we're going to talk about how to improve cognition for mothers postpartum and how to improve executive function, memory, and prevent depression, which is something, unfortunately, that happens to a lot of women. But there's good news is we have a lot of natural ways that can help you overcome that. So Dr. Brighten, thanks for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Something I should tell you about when I listen to your podcast. So not a lot of people know this, but I was a group fitness instructor for well over a decade. It's how I worked my way through college. But every time I hear your intro music on your podcast, I always want to work out. Every time. And so I forgot we ran into each other at IFM and I wanted to tell you that. I'm like, I love your intro music. I'm always like, yeah, I want to lift some weights.
Yeah, that's that animal song. I love techno. I mean, I listen to all kinds of music, but techno is kind of one of my go-tos for like getting fired up and working out and stuff. And, you know, it's nice to hear that feedback because a lot of other people in the fitness and health space and integrative medicine space have real kind of piano-y jazz type feel. And I'm like, you know what? I want to get people kind of fired up. So I never really knew if it was resonating.
It works because I'll be in my car and I'm like, oh, I'm going to work. Like, I wish I was going to the gym.
Yeah. That's the point. So fantastic. Well, again, thanks for being here, especially when you're on vacation and stuff like that. So we'll jam pack this with some how-tos, but maybe let's kind of start off. I know you have a background in molecular biology, I believe, from Cal Poly. So how did you get into naturopathic medicine?
Yeah, so my background is in nutrition science, and then I studied molecular nutrition, so nutritional biochemistry at Cal Poly. And while I was there, I had the opportunity to go to UC Davis and get my PhD in nutrition, and I was on track for that. And it was just something that I stumbled across, really, naturopathic medicine. I was a sick kid. I had a lot of GI stuff going on, and I really came to take control of my health and realize that food is medicine. And I was put on proton pump inhibitors and all kinds of nasty stuff when I was like 17. And that just, that wasn't going to work for me. But I found naturopathic medicine. I remember I was being pushed a lot by other people who were like, you'd be a great doctor. You should really go into the healthcare. And I was like, that's just not for me. Like I don't have anything against conventional medicine. It just didn't jive with me in the way I was handled as a patient with more of these chronic issues. It just didn't work for me. So when I found naturopathic medicine, it was an instant fit. It just totally clicked. And it's something that it's kind of funny because my husband was just talking to me about like how he's like, you're such a rebel. You became a naturopathic doctor because from day one, I knew that I wanted to do things differently. And when I found naturopathic medicine, I was like, this makes sense, like to make the foundation about root cause and then to really pursue how do we support the body and what it should be doing. And what I really like about naturopathic medicine is it's not just about root cause and treating and getting people better, but it's also about knowing the balance of like, when is it sometimes just what the body's doing is wise and we need to get out of the way and we need to let your body process those things. So there's a lot of art to it. It's a great medicine, but also you've got to be a bit of an artist as well.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. And any practitioner, I think, needs to be a really good artist because we're kind of weaving things and synthesizing and putting different ideas together and taking a history and all that. So you bring up a really good point that, I think conventional medicine is really algorithm based. You come in with X symptom, then you diagnose it and you get Y treatment. It's very I mean, a computer could do that, probably
Mhm.
better than a human. And I think that's where medicine is going. But when it comes to prevention, you need all the, life history and epigenetics, genetics, gut. I mean, there's so many, it's multifaceted. So it's funny that you talk about that. That's a great perspective.
Yeah.
Now,
It's,
along those lines, I think,
oh, sorry.
go ahead.
I was just going to say, it's really interesting that you said like a computer could do that and that you think medicine might be going that way, because being in the Bay Area, I have a lot of people who are in the tech industry and a lot of people that are like at Google and Facebook and working at these different companies. And that's something that they say to me is like why they come to me, because they're like, I feel like what my doctor does, a computer could do, and that's going to be the future. Computers are going to do it, but what you're doing, there's no way we can basically kind of replicate that in technology. So that it's really funny you say that, because I feel like that's along the lines where like where you and I work, is that like there's more than just the algorithm, and it's more than just the art too. It's also about the practitioner's relationship with the patient, which is really big, I think, in the functional medicine, naturopathic medicine sphere, is that you've got to connect. I mean, part of the therapy is the human connection there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's funny. I didn't really know about that. Like, I get, through my own experience through seeing integrative practitioners, I kind of knew that was there, but didn't really fully understand it until I was, kind of in a group dinner actually in Chicago a couple of years ago with a bunch of, practitioners that are really big into functional medicine. And they told me that most of the healing for anything from fibromyalgia, chronic fatigue, depression comes from that like 30 minutes where the practitioner really resonates with the patient on an emotional level. It's not so much, the treatments help, whether it's natural or IV therapies, but it was that connection. They all kind of were, suggesting that that's the most powerful part of it, which I think, and a computer, like you say, can never replicate that.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I hug all my patients, and it's something that I talk about, like, just that human touch, like in that moment, we just released oxytocin, like, and it's amazing to me how often people will talk about how they don't connect. I mean, I don't hate on social media. And I definitely think there's a time and a place for it. I've made a lot of great, I mean, you and I met through social media, made it. And then when we connected in person, I made a lot of great connections, but there is still that need for human touch. And that's something we were going to be talking about today too.
Yeah, it's a perfect transition. You mentioned oxytocin, which I believe postpartum, is that a little bit decreased? Why is that maybe why women get depressed?
Oh, oxytocin actually comes up in the postpartum period. So, but I mean, there are studies that show that if you don't have adequate oxytocin, that can lend itself to postpartum depression. Postpartum depression is definitely multifaceted. And I know there's a lot of research out there trying to point the finger at one thing. I don't think we're going to be able to do that. But oxytocin is our love hormone. And when you're in the postpartum period, it's actually that snuggling, that cuddling. Even if you're not breastfeeding, the connection of touching your infant actually helps you release your oxytocin. So there was an interesting study that came out showing that 5 hours of skin to skin, so mama and baby skin to skin throughout the day, which is, if you've never had a baby, you might be like, 5 hours is a long time. If you've had a baby, you're like, 5 hours in the day. I mean, you and baby are there like together the entire time. You're not separating in that first week, but 5 hours in the first week and then 2 hours daily for the next 3 weeks. So within that first month, getting a lot of skin to skin connection actually decreased the levels of postpartum depression. They thought, okay, this is actually preventative for moms because it's raising oxytocin. Oxytocin's opposing cortisol and some of these stress hormones. And so it's actually modulating the hormonal system overall. And it feels really good. I mean, oxytocin is also what gets released when a woman has an orgasm. It's why women are like, we feel so blissed out. It's a really good feeling hormone to have circulating.
Yeah, I love that. And the skin to skin, I mean, that's great, I think, for fathers too. It's because oftentimes as parents, the mother generally does a lot of the work, with breastfeeding and waking up in the middle of the night. And so taking a shower with your baby for me as a father was the best way to connect, because I couldn't provide all those other, the support, that moms can provide.
No, I think it's really important for fathers as well. It's for a long time, people weren't talking about postpartum depression in women. It was something to be really ashamed of, I think, in our society. And even though it's like 20% of women experience it, it's really, really common. We see that fathers as well can experience postpartum depression. They can also have the same kind of bonding mechanisms take place. But I think only now we're starting to talk. I mean, I still feel we've got a long way to go in women's health, but I think also with fathers as well and what's happening with them. I mean, my kind of mission is to make sure we take better care of mothers, but we've got to take better care of the family unit overall. And I love that. Something that I did with my husband and I recommend my patients is I would breastfeed, do the skin to skin, and then put baby on his chest, and then he'd do burping. And like, it was just like we were both involved in the feeding in those early weeks. Yeah, because I think, the bonding for both is really important. And baby's been inside mom, hearing her heartbeat. There's a lot that's already really connected. And then to have father involved, I think it's just, it's really powerful for the whole family to be bonding in that way.
Yeah, it's amazing. Just that skin to skin can totally affect connection and all these neurochemicals. I mean, it's pretty profound.
Yeah.
So let's talk about that. You mentioned when we first kind of started this off and why you got involved in naturopathic medicine was kind of looking at the big picture and seeing things maybe like depression or postpartum depression. In traditional medicine, it's like, oh, that's bad. We're going to give you a drug or treatment to combat that. But if it was so bad, we would probably not experience it because it would have been washed out through, evolution and natural selection. So what is maybe the adaptive benefit of reduced executive function and cognition and possibly depression postpartum?
Yeah, the interesting thing about what gets termed mommy brain, some women hate that, like absolutely hate that term, and I get it, but it's real. And in the last trimester, you start to see the brain shrinks. There's been an estimate about 8% reduction of brain size. Like that, it comes back at about 6 months postpartum is kind of on average that we see this reduction in the brain. It's actually really beneficial, and it's your body being really smart. You get hyper focused on baby, and your amygdala actually grows as well, which is what kind of makes you do baby talk. So you're like, oh God, God. That's a terrible example of baby talk. I talk very different when I had a baby, but so your amygdala enlarges, and it's all about the brain changes that happen. They're all about you becoming hyper focused on your infant's survival and attending to their needs. I joke a lot about how you all of a sudden you have a baby and it's like this antenna goes up that is just wired to baby's frequency, because and you'll see this sometimes with moms, like that when they hear a baby cry, they're just they kind of light up, but especially your own baby. So your brain really adapts in this way, because what we're really meant to do is, if we think back to when we were mothering in tribes and our environment wasn't as protected and guarded as it is now, there were a lot of creatures around that could eat baby. There's a lot going on in our environment that was pretty harsh for a baby. So it was important for mom to be hyper focused, to only want to focus on baby, to take care of baby, to be very tuned in to when baby cries, and to be very alert, and to have that stress response, that fight or flight. Like, I have to get there, I have to move, and I have to defend or run. So all that's really great. But fast forward to the way we live now, we have not adapted to our environment. And a lot of people are like, oh no, sure we have. But really, if we look at, we're still very primal creatures. And what happens instead now is that mom has a baby, and in this country, because we still haven't caught up with what we know to be true, and to see what we're doing wrong in mom's healthcare. But at 6 weeks, maternity leave ends. They go back to work. So you have this brain that's shrunk. You're kind of tuned in to stress, and you aren't sleeping well. There's a lot going on. Your body's trying to recover. So now you're not only having to take care of a baby, but you're having to grocery shop and cook and go to work and, drive somewhere and go through all these day-to-day routines. You're not set up for that. We just really aren't. We used to mother in tribes. In Chinese medicine, a woman's feet, they didn't touch the floor for 40 days. They had people bringing them food. There's all of this really traditional medicine, and I call it medicine. It was just a way of life for people where they took care of mom, and her job was to focus on baby and on recovering her body. And we've moved so far away from that. And we get ourselves in this artificial environment. And that's, that I think is a big part of why postpartum depression and mental health altogether is on the rise. And we've got this artificial environment, but we've got a lot of stress. And when we're feeling stressed out and we've got these cortisol levels going up and down, that starts to mess with our neurotransmitters. And then we get the inflammation rising up, and that's coming from environment. You just had a baby. There's a lot of tissues that have to heal, but there's a lot of things taking place that really set you up to have depression or anxiety as a person in just a person in our society, but definitely in the context of like, now you're a mom, now you're in a new role, and your body needs all of these extra things.
Wow, beautifully said. I think our listeners are going to hit the rewind button on that one to kind of listen to that again. But a couple of things came to mind, and one of them, the amygdala. So I don't know a lot about neurochemistry, but I know that the amygdala is kind of where fear and things reside. People have like trauma, childhood trauma is kind of stored in the amygdala. So if that enlarges, so that in the postpartum window, people can be more sensitive to stress, I would assume.
They're more, in the postpartum window, women are more sensitive overall. Emotions are fluctuating, and that's the amygdala. It's also the hormones. When you have a baby and you lose your placenta, your hormones drop. And you're essentially in the same place that a postmenopausal woman finds herself, except that instead of going through perimenopause, it just happened. Like it's just happened. And so you have that significant hormone drop that happens, and that withdrawal can cause baby blues, which we see will last for the first couple of weeks, where women feel kind of sad, weepy. I remember, so I put together this birth playlist. I was just at the IFM conference. I had an MD there call me. She's like, "So you're really crunchy." And I was like, what does that mean? And she's like, "Oh, you're just like really granola, like crunchy hippie mom." And I'm like, I never think of myself that way. But when I'm talking to a doctor who was trained in conventional medicine, I realized that I had a home birth. I made a birth playlist, like the way I did. There was a birth tub in my house, like the way I did things. I'm like, oh yeah, that totally sounds like, but it was just like, that was just my path. That was the way I wanted to birth. But I had this birth playlist, and I think I was about a week, maybe a week and a half postpartum. And my husband, he was out and he came home, and I was just bawling. And this song came on that my son was born to. And I was just crying and holding my baby. And my husband's like, oh my God, what's happening? And I'm like, I'm just so happy right now. and then I think it was a few hours later that I was like, I'm so sad. I don't know why. And these hormones are just going all over the place. And something that, we touched on a little bit, but I think is really important is sometimes when these emotions come up, and especially like men have a tendency to want to fix things and to make things better, which is really admirable. And I think some women kind of dog on that sometimes, but because we're like, we want to be listened to, but yeah, there's sometimes you need stuff fixed. It's a good thing. But that being said, sometimes we just got to hold space for people to have their emotions and to have their feelings, and to recognize, and that goes back to sometimes just getting out of the body's way. And for example, I had a woman this week whose anxiety really took control of her. She was talking about some stuff, brought up some past stuff in my office, and she literally just got down in child's pose on the floor in my office and just started crying. And my kind of mom doctor brain right away was like, okay, what can we do? I could give her some passion flower, and started thinking about ways to calm her down. And then I had to stop and say, you know what? Maybe she just needs to go through this. Like maybe she needs to experience this. And instead of us trying to make things better, we just need to hold space and let her know. And that's what I did. I got down on the floor with her and was like, okay, this is okay. I'm here for you. Let me know what you need if you need something, but otherwise let's just breathe and let's get our breath back. And just being present, I think it's huge. And this was just, this woman wasn't a mom. I think it holds true for everyone, but I think especially, with moms in this early period, letting them know this is okay. This is totally normal. Forgetting where your keys are, that's totally normal. There's nothing wrong with you. And I think we tend to make a pathology out of every symptom that comes up for moms, where it's like, you have this is wrong. And it's not. Your body's being very wise. It's doing what it's supposed to. And sometimes we just need to back up and say, does this need intervention or does it not? And there's certainly times, so in my practice, I work with postpartum moms. So I work with moms when they're pregnant. We get a postpartum plan together, and I'm big on prevention. And we start to talk about, okay, this is where you've been. We know this is your family history. This is what happened with your mom. Okay, what do we think we need to do? I give them a plan for the first 6 weeks postpartum, which is a lot about body care and about what they should be eating, and just a lot of like rest. Don't get on your feet too quick. And then they come back at 6 weeks and we do a check-in. And anywhere from 6 weeks to 3 months postpartum, I'm running labs in there. So I'm tracking anemia, making sure we don't have thyroid symptoms coming up, or if there's thyroid symptoms coming up, we do a lab sooner, but making sure we don't have postpartum thyroiditis or thyroid dysfunction happen, looking at cortisol levels. I mean, we're really looking at everything. Because in the first year, a whole lot can happen in a woman's life. And it can be the difference from her absolutely loving being a mother or feeling like she made the biggest mistake in her life. And I just want to say it is totally normal to 1 minute feel like this is the best thing you ever did, and the next minute feel like this is the worst idea you've ever had, is to have a child. That is totally normal in motherhood. You have a toddler right now. We both have toddlers. You have a girl. I don't know if it's the same. Everybody likes to say like, oh, boys are so much more adventurous, and haphazard is really the term. But I was totally that kid too. So I don't think it's just gender based, but I call it suicide watch sometimes, because my son is literally going to try to jump off of or eat any poison he can find. Like, it can be crazy sometimes. And so there's minutes where I'm like, oh my gosh, I love him. We're cuddling in bed. This was just 2 days ago. We're cuddling in bed. And he looked at his hand. We were counting fingers, and I was telling him which fingers, naming them. And he curls it up into a ball, realizes he has a fist, and punches me right in the nose. And I was like, this hurts really bad. Oh my gosh. And then we go through this whole thing of like, okay, that's not good. Okay. And it's a moment where he just figured out he could do that. Like, let's talk this through. And I'm like, it's okay. And, I love you. And he's like, no, you don't love me and I don't love you, and walks away. And I'm like, oh, I'm heartbroken right now. And then he comes back and hugs me. And so, there's a lot of up and down that happens. And I think sometimes women and people in general feel like when they're experiencing these ups and downs in their emotions, like maybe that's a problem. We're supposed to experience ups and downs. If we think about, I sometimes talk about emotions and moods being like a room in your house. You should be able to go in and out of every room in your house with ease. When we have a problem is when you get stuck in one room and you don't know how to open that door and come back out. That's when we have a problem. But otherwise, having a day where you feel like my mood's really low, and maybe you have times that you're anxious. I mean, getting anxiety, a lot of people experience that from time to time, but it's when we get stuck in this pattern and this habit, that's when we have to start looking at intervention. And really, intervention should start with the most simplest foundational things first before I do use supplements, but before we go supplements, I like to step back and look at like, okay, things that I call foundations of health, things that every human has to have in line in order to really thrive. Like, if those are out of place, we need to start there. We need to start looking at that.
Fantastic. Yeah, let's talk about intervention first, but I will want to kind of explore something that I think a lot of women struggle with. And after you have the baby, the mom has the baby, there's a need or kind of an impetus to get the body back and start working out and exercising, get the baby fat, start moving again. But as I heard from you, that may be counterproductive because we want to rest and rebuild. And I think resting metabolic rate and calorie need actually increases, if I'm not mistaken, during breastfeeding, because it takes a lot of energy to produce breast milk. So what words of advice would you have for women to let them know how important breastfeeding is for their baby, and also how important rest is?
Yeah. I want to say that I am not unique from any other woman in having body image issues. We all go through it. And I see women out there that are like, I love my body and I'm totally comfortable in it and I love them and I want to aspire to be them. But I still fall into that sometimes I look in the mirror and I'm like, whoa, that didn't used to look like that. So the thing to recognize is that you had a baby, you grew a human. that's huge. You're amazing. You grew an entire human. And when you look at your body, you have this cute little belly bump, and everybody loves the belly bump. Then you have a baby and you still have all of that weight that you gained. There's fat there. It's on your hips, your butt, your thighs. Things are out of proportion now because you don't have that cute baby bump. So it's really common for women to look in the mirror and to feel like, oh, I need to get my body back. Something's wrong with my body. Your body stored all of that for a reason. If you found yourself in a famine, you still have a reserve to feed your baby and to feed yourself. Your caloric needs, they increase by about 500 to 700 calories just in breastfeeding. And most women, if not all women, find themselves starving and not able to get enough energy. So there, I remember my husband came home one day and he was like, "What are you doing?" Because I was sitting on the kitchen floor eating coconut oil out of the jar with like an avocado on the side. And he's like, "What are you doing?" I never have needed so much fat in my life than when I was breastfeeding. Not every woman is going to drop weight just because they're breastfeeding. Some women have more of a challenge in that. Sometimes there's things going on with their hormones we need to look at in that regard. Some women stop breastfeeding and then they lose the weight. Every body is different. Every person is different. But in the beginning, you really need to rest. And something I really like to drive home is that you need to think about, there's two things. Your uterus is still heavy and relaxin is still present. Relaxin is a hormone that makes your ligaments. I mean, it's the simplest way to think about it. It's the whole reason that your hips spread and you were able to pass a human out of your body. So your ligaments and tendons that are holding up, holding the muscles, the bones, everybody, in a nice, balance. You also have these ligaments holding your uterus. Your uterus is heavy. You're up, you're moving around. You don't have this pelvic girdle supporting you anymore because those muscles underwent some trauma. This is when we can start to see things like uterine prolapse, early stages where the uterus is heavy and it's starting to slide down. Maybe you don't notice it now. Maybe in 30 years, it becomes a problem. So that's one piece of it. The other piece, so you need to rest your body. You still have all this relaxin. If you're starting, I ran into a woman in CrossFit who was 2 months postpartum, and she was like, "Yeah, I'm going to do all this ab work." And I'm like, okay. You can really injure yourself, and you may have not had a splitting of your abs, so the diastasis recti, during pregnancy, but you can still develop that if you're inappropriately training your abs afterwards. So there's a lot of considerations. Now, I think walking is great. I ask women, give yourself at least 2 weeks, if not 6 weeks, to go really moderate with things. It all depends on how you birthed. I mean, if you were one of those women that had a quick labor and everything was perfect, picture perfect, great. You're probably going to be able to recover quicker. If you had a C-section, you might have a good 2 to 3 months before you feel like you can really get things moving again. I think walking is great though for getting outside, getting out in nature. You're going to be using that cross-body action. So your right lobe, left lobe of your brain, they're going to be integrated. They're going to be talking. It helps dissipate stress. You're breathing fresh air. That's fantastic. There's a lot of positives in that. But we need to focus less on how our bodies look as mothers and more on what our bodies have done and what they are doing. You built and sustained a life within your body. I mean, my son, we're explaining this now, he's still tripping out on, "Oh my gosh, you grew me. I'm like, I know, it's so cool, right?
Yeah.
So, there's that piece. And then knowing that, like, the general recommendations is you don't even start to try to lose weight or, adopt a really rigorous exercise program until you're a year postpartum, because you really, in that time, you need to be taking care of your body, and you don't want to compromise your milk supply. Because as you said, breastfeeding is really important. Now, I want to say, not every woman can breastfeed. It doesn't work for everyone. And you're not a bad mom for that. There's no shame in that. I don't believe in shaming moms. But if you can breastfeed, you are providing your baby's body with so many nutrients. You're protecting their immunity. And then my favorite, your favorite too, the microbiome just thrives. I mean, it just thrives. Everything in breast milk really sets up baby's tummy to just have this rocking microbiome. I mean, there's not enough to say about that.
Right. Yeah. I mean, from preventing autoimmunity or obesity, increasing, IQ. I mean, there's so many benefits. Now, any tips for moms to improve milk production or nutrition tips or supplements that you like to recommend?
Yeah, well, the biggest thing is to feed on demand. Your body knows what to do. I think a lot of women, they get in this mindset of like, what if I don't produce enough milk? I just had a mom yesterday she was told me, I'm pumping after I feed my daughter and I'm only getting 3 ounces. And she was really worried about it. And I'm like, listen, your baby will eat on demand. And as long as you're following that, you don't need to have a schedule in the beginning. As long as you're getting adequate amount of wet diapers, there's a lot of signs, baby's gaining weight, everything's fine. Now, times when a mom's not producing enough breast milk and I see that it's going down, my first thought is, what is stress like and how is she managing her stress? Because that is really going to affect your milk supply. My second thought is, do we have a thyroid issue happening? That can be one of the first signs in postpartum that we have a thyroid issue. And so I like to look at those things out. We want to rule out like big scaries, like, okay, is there some kind of like thyroid issue going on, and make sure that's not the case. But something I will say, and how I really got into working with moms was when I was in medical school, I was doing rotations with a pediatrician. So I'm such a nerd. On all my vacations, I would come down. He's actually on the Central Coast, and he's my son's pediatrician now. And I would work in his office with him because he is like with the virus, he's like, we don't have a whole lot to offer for a virus. Naturopathic medicine, I'm like, bring on the viruses. We got this. Right. But something that I noticed is every time I was in the room, the mom would start asking questions about her health. And he's like, I'm a pediatrician. I don't do women's health. And then I was working with him after I was licensed. I was working in his office, and he would just start saying, you know what, talk to Dr. Brighten. He would leave the room and I'd be talking to these moms. It really was eye-opening to me that in the first year postpartum, these women didn't really have anyone to turn to. Their OB was like, you had a baby, my job's done. And that's when I was like, these women need help. Like, I really want to help these women because they are juggling so much and then I became a mom and I'm like, oh yeah, it's really hard. The most common thing that came up when women are having breastfeeding issues is they're like, I'm taking fenugreek, great herb. Okay, great herb. But the most common thing was, how much water are you drinking? Well, I'm drinking like 16 to 20 ounces a day. And they would think that's a lot. That's not. You need at least like 80 ounces. So the big thing is looking at making sure you're getting enough water and enough fluids. The other thing is making sure you're getting really nutrient dense foods. So of course, lots of fruits and vegetables, lots of high quality protein and fat. The other thing that I really love my patients to have is bone broth and organ meat. And I know some people are going to listen to this and be like, disgusting. She just said organ meat. Right. I can throw down on some beef heart and that's not a problem. I definitely am one of those people that if I'm eating liver, I don't want to prep it. I used to prep liver for my dog. I'm like, not for me. But you can, so a little trick is that you can dice up liver into like pill sizes and freeze it. So you put it in your freezer in like a Ziploc bag and freeze it flat, and then freeze it for like 2 to 3 weeks. So you kill all the pathogens in there. And then you can take like 2 to 3 of those a day and just swallow them. So you're getting liver in. But the reason for these organ meats, traditional cultures feed postpartum women organ meats. It was really interesting. Kidneys were really big in some cultures, and our adrenal glands sit right on top of our kidneys. So I'm like, I can't help but think that there was something there. But eating these organ meats, so you're getting lots of vitamin A, you're restoring your iron, which if you had a lot of bleeding during your labor or in the postpartum period, then it's really important to build your blood back up. And a lot of like Eastern cultures see these organ meats as blood building. But the other thing about them is that they are high in glycine. And there's been research showing that glycine helps elevate serotonin levels, which we all think, oh, serotonin, that's positive, healthy, happy mood neurotransmitter. But serotonin is also the precursor for melatonin. So if you don't have adequate serotonin, you'll have sleep issues as well. So organ meats are something that are really nutritive. And I know a lot of people, there's like the lactation cookies and everyone swears by oatmeal. I've had patients that are like, oh, oatmeal works really well for me. I don't see it across the board, but definitely getting fluids up, hitting the bone broth and getting the organ meats and then the lots of vegetables. I see that works so well in women. And then there's the decrease your stress and make sure you're going to bed when you can in the beginning. there's not a lot of sleep happening, as you know. I always like hesitate to say that because I'm like, nobody's going to want to have a baby if they actually knew how little you sleep. But our biology is really good at, tends to be this thing that I see that happens in my patients. They'll be, I'm not going to have a baby. I don't want to have a baby. And then somewhere in that 30-year-old mark where they're like, I have to have a baby. Like yesterday I needed a baby. I need a baby right now.
It's amazing. Yeah. A couple of things I want to pull apart and just pick up on that last section about, the utility. I mean, if you look at happiness scales, there's a book right now by a Penn State researcher. I'm blanking on the name. But single people are generally happier than married couples with kids. And you might think like, well, why would anyone want to have kids? I mean, there's a lot of stress, there's financial issues, but it provides another layer of purpose. And, there's a lot more meaning in your life when you have a child. So anyone listening, like thinking, I'm not going to have kids, there's too much stress. It's definitely worth it. And yeah, there are some, you definitely lose out on sleep, and it's a lot of time. You don't have as much personal time, but it's a form of love that you'll never find, in my opinion, anywhere else. So I would highly recommend it. But let's kind of talk about, it was funny, my wife and I, when we had our baby, we were really stressed too, and she couldn't produce a lot of breast milk. And my friend, a naturopathic doctor as well, Ben Lynch, was like, you got to try loading her up on ashwagandha. And all of a sudden she was producing big time. And I'm like, what is it about ashwagandha? And it just clicked with me. It's the stress reduction probably.
Totally. Yeah. So that's another piece of it for sure. I just want to go back to what you were saying about, it's true. Research shows the lowest point of happiness in a couple's life is when they have kids. But the other thing I will say is that children give you the opportunity to play and to see the world like you used to see it. And we really forget that as adults. When my son finds a bug and lights up about it, and I can talk about a bug and see it through his eyes, or going to the beach for the first time, there is nothing that makes you go back and really experience that. And you've got to be present. There is a demand for you to be present. And that is probably one of the healthiest ways you can live your life. There's a whole lot of life we miss out on. And I'm not saying you have to have children to be able to do this, but I will say that my son gives me the opportunity for all of this. And I feel that he teaches me more about he teaches me way more about life than I'm ever going to teach him. And what I experience and what I learned from him, there's nowhere else I could get that kind of experience. But yeah, so in terms of stress, ashwagandha is awesome. It also supports the thyroid, which we love. And it kind of, you can take it at night. It's one of those adaptogenic herbs. You can take it at night that helps with sleep. I also like to use rhodiola sometimes in women. I love rhodiola. I know it gets a lot of people love rhodiola, but I see it as the endurance herb. It's like, it's endurance for your mind. It's endurance for your body. And when you've got to go the distance, I think rhodiola is such a great herb for that. Occasionally I'll use licorice as well in women if we're seeing really low cortisol levels or a lot of inflammation taking place. A lot of traditional Chinese formulas incorporate licorice a lot, but in a lot of postpartum formulas, but that anti-inflammatory property is really important because if you have inflammation rising up, your cortisol levels, they're going to try to combat that. And if they can't keep up with it and they go down, you can get basically a cytokine starting to bombard the brain, and you get inflammation in the brain. You get these cytokines, going around and basically disrupting your neurotransmitters. So taking care of the adrenals is definitely important. Other things that I have my postpartum women do is drink ginger turmeric tea. So like a tablespoon of each fresh. Turmeric isn't awesome tasting, but it's so powerful. And I haven't put a little black pepper in there. They can add a little bit of milk, depending on if they have food sensitivities, what milks work for them. And then a little bit of honey. But having that turmeric for the anti-inflammatory properties, the ginger is also very warming, which is important in the postpartum period. And then it's all really great for the gut. And as you know, I think as anybody who's hip to microbiome right now knows that if you want to take care of the brain, you got to look at the gut, and you got to make sure the gut's happy. Because if your digestion is off and your microbiome's off, you're definitely going to have issues in the body overall, but you're going to see more issues towards anxiety or even depression. But also, a lot of women they become pregnant and they're kind of already nutrient depleted. Like they don't have the best nutrient stores. And pregnancy and breastfeeding are highly demanding on a woman's body, and your nutrient intake goes up with that. So if your gut isn't absorbing optimally and you're in the postpartum phase, you're not going to be getting the nutrients that you need. And I was talking about the serotonin to melatonin conversion and what happens with a lot of these neurotransmitters. You need B vitamins, you need magnesium. There's a lot of cofactors. There's things that are a little difficult for us to absorb as it is, but you have a gut that isn't absorbing, or you have low stomach acid, things along those lines, you're going to have more of an issue arise with that.
Completely. Yeah. Great information there. And just to highlight something a little bit, we talked about breastfeeding and how important that is. And you talked about eating all these polyphenols and herbs and spices, how they're good for the gut. But there's an enteromammary cycle. So your gut bacteria actually cycle, into breast milk. And there's some communication and crosstalk there. So you definitely want to support the gut, like you're saying, Dr. Brighten, which is fantastic. Now, you mentioned beef hearts and organ meats, which I think are really great. But people are kind of spooked out. Like, how am I going to cook this? What do I do? I found like just onions and garlic and salt, and maybe some tamari can pretty much make anything taste good.
Totally.
On organ meat.
I'm sorry that you cut out a bit.
Sorry. Any recommendations to encourage people to eat more organ meats and how to make them palatable?
Yeah, so there was the freezing the liver. You can always go with the bone broth method. I think that's great. I encourage all of my women to have bone broth stored up in their freezer, and you can actually just store it in. There's those big ice cube trays. They're more for cocktails, but we make bone broth cocktails in postpartum. But you can have those and store it out like that, so you can cook them into foods. So when it comes to beef heart, I like it when you mix it in with ground beef, like a 50-50 ground of that. There's a place in Berkeley called Mission Heirloom that if you're in the Bay Area, you should go try their beef heart burger. It's really good. The other thing is that you can take these organ meats and you can take like liver, and I would recommend, if you feel squeamish about it, and I actually recommend having people cook for you all together in your postpartum period, but you can have someone cook this and then just mix it in with other foods, or you can even grind it up. And there's something that's interesting that I've had patients do is there are some delivery companies that do baby food, which is liver. Like they'll do baby food that's just ground up liver. And it's kind of like a pate, but it'll come in ice cubes. There's a Weston A. Price, really big in the Bay Area. So there's a bunch of companies that do this, but they can get the in the ice cube, and then they can actually defrost it and then just put it in with a stir fry with like other meats and other foods. You can also cook it into like a sauce. You can just kind of sneak it in. Like people try to sneak foods into toddlers, you just sneak it in on yourself. But the other thing is you can do gelatin as well, grass-fed gelatin. Having that, you can put that into smoothies. That's also a good source of glycine as well, and it's going to give you an array of amino acids in there. The other thing, so in breast milk supply, I was just going to say that the microbiome, there's been research showing that a healthy microbiome, moms with a healthier, more diverse, actually make higher levels of breast milk, that it influences their breast milk production. And turmeric has actually been used traditionally in helping with breast milk supply. And then there's a lot of companies out there, like Herb Farm is a really good company, and Wish Garden Herbs, that they make tinctures. There's also teas out there for breast milk that'll have like fenugreek and goat's rue, and some of them do have some adaptogenic herbs in there, which is part of that recipe.
That's awesome. Great advice there. And, on the organ meats thing, I think it's just something that people need to, it's just a new habit. It's a new food, you just got to include it in the diet periodically. And we used to eat a lot of organ meats, historically, humans. And if you go to different countries throughout the world, they all still consume a lot of organ meats. It's been kind of devoid in the American diet. So it's something we need to include and just experiment and play around and try it. But like you said, I like that mixing it in with like grass-fed lamb or grass-fed beef or elk. It's a really easy way to mask things. So advice there. All right. Well, let's finish up on some practical how-tos. So the mommy brain, as it was, any supplements or any foods that are like you've had a lot of success with?
Yeah. So there's all the foods that we talked about. Something that I think is really foundational that women should be trying to do is get more sleep. So the lack of sleep, cortisol pulsing actually destroys, well, I shouldn't say it destroys, but it damages the hippocampus, which is our memory center. So mommy needs a bedtime routine as well. We make bedtime routines for our children, but we also need to get off of the computer, the TV, not fold all the laundry until midnight. I've been guilty of this. I'm not judging, but making sure that you're taking care of yourself at the end of the day. I think self-care, and play. I just tried to combine those because they're kind of the same, but self-care and play is really important for parents, moms and dads alike. Something that I do like to use if women are having difficulty going to sleep at night and they're having issues with their memory is phosphatidylserine. It helps repair the hippocampus. It dampens the cortisol levels. And so it's a great amino acid, not just for dampening cortisol, but actually for repairing the hippocampus. Don't dog on yourself too much if you're like, I'm doing all these things right and my memory is still having issues. Your job is to focus on baby. So, that's phosphatidylserine. I think that every woman, when she's pregnant, should be getting sources of fish oil. So if the fish oil is coming from a really good company that screens for mercury, and I like to use companies that do sustainable fishing practices, and we're looking at that whole picture, and third-party testing is really important for me too. So someone who is not invested in making money for this company's product checks it out and says what they say is there and there's nothing bad in it. But you can also eat lots of sardines, anchovies, mackerel, salmon, things like that, getting that 3 times a week. I think that's really important in brain health. Fish oil, you want to be careful. More isn't always better. There's conditions like bipolar that there's been some research showing that if you pass the 2,000 milligrams of omega-3 daily, you pass that threshold, you might be actually doing more harm than good. But DHA, that's the part of the omega-3s. That's the type that we really want to focus on for brain health. Baby's brain is growing rapidly in the first 5 years. So if you're getting DHA, it's good for your brain. It's also going to pass through your breast milk and be good for baby's brain as well. Mm-hmm. I think women should stay on their prenatals. You definitely need extra vitamins because, like we were talking about, it's a nutrient draining situation to be in if you're firstly having a baby, but also if you don't have really good gut health. So making sure you have your prenatals, because eating good food, I definitely love food as medicine, but the thing is that you don't know the soil something was grown in. It might not have the magnesium that you think it's had in there. So having that wide variety, a good spectrum prenatal, I think is really important. Getting your D3 checked. Vitamin D3 is so rad. Well, if you see my Instagram posts, I'm kind of a nerd about things I post on, but I mean, vitamin D3, it's affecting your microbiome. Baby is dependent on mama's D3 when they're breastfeeding. And we know people, you're in Seattle, people that are up, in that part of the country that aren't getting as much sunlight have higher risks of cancers and chronic disease. And it comes down to that vitamin D. So get out in the sunshine, expose yourself to light. If you are in a place where it's winter, I had my son in December and it was like 30 degrees outside. I was not out in sunlight, but in retrospect, something that I should have prepped for and should have done, that I carry this lesson forward and share with my patients, is getting actually natural light in your house that you can expose yourself to. And then getting your levels tested, making sure you have adequate D3, because it's going to help with your brain health as well and your overall health. And if you're exposed to viruses, bacteria, you want good D3, you want good immune support, because your baby's health depends on your health. Mm-hmm. And then depending on, what your family history is or things that have been your needs, you might need extra magnesium, which can be really great muscle relaxing. I think vitamin C does great for the adrenals. Mm-hmm. You can eat vitamin C rich foods. Right now, we're in a great season for that. But vitamin C is also important in the connective tissue, which needs a lot of healing after you've had a baby. We've talked about turmeric. I'm just like rattling off a whole lot of stuff. Good. People are probably driving right now being like, oh my gosh, this is so much to write down. And then probiotics might be necessary as well. I think probiotics do really great. There was a recent study showing lactobacillus rhamnosus actually had a real calming effect on women, on people, actually, back it up, on mice. I'm making the translation to people as well. Something that's interesting is that lactobacillus rhamnosus is something that we've known we can use in the treatment of what's called bacterial vaginosis, which is an overgrowth of your own bacteria in the vagina. It's a kind of a type of, basically a type of infection. And it's, since this study's come out, I'm starting to look back at my charts of women we've cultured that didn't have lactobacillus rhamnosis and actually finding they have anxiety as well, which I'm like, somebody needs to do a study on this. It's really interesting. So
awesome.
Sometimes probiotics can be really great to use as well. I'm definitely not subscribing right now to this idea. I think that some of the microbiome research is like, just supplement with this species of probiotic. And I'm more of like, there's a symbiotic relationship, and I think we need to diversify the gut, and we need to promote good gut health overall, which has a lot to do with diet and overall, stress. And there's a whole lot that goes into it. That could be a whole nother podcast. So I think that eating fermented foods, if you don't have an issue with that, there's certain medical conditions where eating fermented foods will make you feel kind of crummy. But if you can eat fermented foods or have water kefir, I think those are really important in overall health for everyone, but especially postpartum. And a big thing, which isn't about nutrients, but is, I think, really important in everyone's health, is lowering our toxic burden. So making sure you're not drinking out of plastic water bottles. Don't even give your baby a plastic bottle if you can help it. Again, not here to make anyone feel bad about how they're parenting, but if you can get glass bottles, that would definitely be better. Going to the environmental working group, Skin Deep website, every single patient of mine gets that website to go to, and their homework is check all of your personal care products, check everything that goes on your body. If you wouldn't put it in your mouth, don't put it on your body. Women's makeup is not regulated the way it should be, in my opinion. And we're unknowingly exposing ourselves to a lot of things that we don't need to be. There's only so much you can control in your environment. So when you're in your home, fill your home with plants that clear the air. Take off your shoes before you walk through your house. That's the number one way we track things into our home. And then take care of all your cleaning supplies. I've had patients who have had like chronic allergies, sinusitis, like these chronic conditions. And we just clean up their environment, get rid of the carpet, make sure that you got a HEPA filter, get plants in your house, which PS, having plants in your house has been shown to lower your blood pressure and stress response. So just creating, like bringing like the green into your house can help with your stress response as well. But I think that we know a lot about the toxins, but I think we're really at the cusp to really understanding how much of an impact. And again, we're not at a place, like our adaptation has not caught up with what we're doing in our environment. And I feel like every day I get some new journal article or some new study, and I'm like, and here's something new to be scared about. And the last thing I would say is, when it comes to research, nothing beats exercise when it comes to changing your mood, improving brain health overall. Nothing beats exercise. And that doesn't have to be hitting the pavement hard. It doesn't have to be, in that early postpartum period, doing weights or anything like that. It can be just walking, gentle movement, stretching, just moving your body. As humans, we're not meant to sit. We're not supposed to be stationary. After you've had a baby, you absolutely are for a period of time. But if you're feeling your mood's getting low, get outside and move your body. And if you need help with that, get someone to make you accountable. Get a friend that you're going to walk with. There's lots of mom groups that you can connect with that do walking. And I got to say this, only join the ones and only surround yourself with people that make you feel good. There's a lot of like judgment that goes around for moms, and there's a lot of competition sometimes where moms are like, I'm going to be a better mom than you. And it's awesome to be the best mom that you can be. But you're not going to click with everyone, and that's not your fault. And you should really focus on bringing people into your life that build you up. And if people are bringing you down, you're just not a right fit. And that doesn't mean there's anything wrong with you or anything wrong with them. You're just not a good fit. And it's just time to move on.
Yeah.
All right. That was a lot. I just totally dumped so much info.
Great tips there. Now, I just wanted to mention that if people go to highintensityhealth.com/105, we'll have the show notes. So I know a lot of people listen to this while they drive, like you said, Dr. Brighten, or when they're exercising. So don't worry, we take the notes for you. And a couple of things that came up, I was going to ask you about detox, and one of them was saunas. Like, so you mentioned ways to minimize exposure, cleaning up the house and the food. But what about reducing, kind of the burden, if you will? I mean, do you recommend sauna or any detox or any supplements?
So when it comes to having a baby, do it before you get pregnant. Like give yourself, so I want you to have detox. So I want let's see, let me back it up. I want you to detox, and then 3 months before you get pregnant, that's when I'm working with someone to optimize their egg. The egg that you become pregnant with matured 3 months before. So I want the detox to happen a while back. If you are pregnant or you are nursing, do not detox. If you are detoxing, you risk that those toxins going into baby or going into your breast milk. Your body is really smart. I say this a lot, but your body's really smart at sequestering these toxins and keeping them away from baby. And so let's make it that way. So what I recommend for detox, if you're pregnant or you're breastfeeding, because you can still detoxify your body, is really simple ways of what I call opening the emunctories. Emunctories are the ways that we naturally detoxify. So you want to make sure your bowels are moving, that you're urinating, that you're breathing. So let's talk a little bit about that. So you need to have regular bowel movements. Those should be happening every day. When you first have a baby, it's not uncommon to go a couple of days without a bowel movement because there's a lot of swelling, lots happen, but the sooner you have a bowel movement, the easier it is for you in general. But we're not going to stay too long up there. So bowel movements need to be every day. If they're not every day, there's a problem there. You're not only going to have issues with the toxins you're trying to move out that are environmental, but the ones that you're creating yourself. Drinking plenty of water so that your kidneys can do their job. They're filtering a lot of blood. They want to move things out. So it's really important that you're getting plenty of fluids. And that doesn't always have to come with just water. You can have coconut water. You can have broths. You can have mineral water. I think getting some electrolytes in is really good, but recognize that soups and teas are also a source of fluids. And you're also getting, this time of year, watermelon, great source of fluids. So that's taking care of the bowels and the kidneys. Deep breathing every single day, 50 to 100 breaths if you can. That seems daunting, but if you think about it, make it every time you touch a doorknob, you take a really deep breath and exhale, or find a trick. You're breathing right now where it's like, so a lot of people check their cell phones often. So I'll tell my patients, every time you check your cell phone, take a deep breath, maybe 5. So we're removing carbon dioxide. We're moving that out as well. And then anything that you're breathing in your environment, just clearing that out of the lungs. Dry skin brushing is a great way to exfoliate your skin. So very lightly brushing the skin with like a loofah or a fine bristled brush from your toes all the way up, then take it from the fingertips all the way in, ending at your heart. It'll move your lymphatic system, which dumps into the heart. So that will help your skin exfoliate, and it will also help move your lymphatic system as well. So the other thing that I like patients to do, I have them actually do it in pregnancy until the uterus gets to a certain size. So basically, we never put castor oil over a uterus, but you can put it on the upper right of your abdomen, of your liver, and it actually stimulates blood flow and circulation to the liver. Eating things like cruciferous vegetables, so I will say some babies, they don't like it when you're breastfeeding and you're eating a lot of cruciferous vegetables, but the cruciferous vegetables are great at detoxifying because they're offering the liver a lot of constituents to help detoxify. Eating lots of plants, eating a really good diet is going to help the liver as well. And then really want to, you said a while ago, like when we were talking about N-acetylcysteine supports glutathione. Glutathione is the mama of antioxidants. I mean, she's going to help your brain. She's going to help inflammation. She's going to help your liver. She's rad. I love her. So you can also, N-acetylcysteine is safe when you're breastfeeding. And there's actually been some research on supplementing with N-acetylcysteine in helping prevent miscarriage early on as well. So that's some of the things that I have my patients do. Again, moving your body, getting outside, just these really basic things that help you detox every day. I think infrared saunas are great, but again, we don't, and I think it would be fine if you were postpartum. I wouldn't get into an infrared sauna when you're pregnant. We want to be careful about heat. But I think that when you're pregnant and you're breastfeeding, you should really focus on just your natural ways to detoxify. And you don't want to try to push anything out of your tissues, because when it comes out of your tissues, it needs to have somewhere to go. You're excreting breast milk. That's one means to get things out of the body. So we don't want baby picking up anything. Plus, in the beginning, their livers, they're so new to everything happening in their environment. And we know from the environmental working groups work that they're born with such a toxic burden as it is. So let's just be careful with them.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. That was a lot of practical and very applicable advice there. So I know you're working on a book, or you have an ebook, because our listeners are going to want more, because this is just so awesome. Can you plug that before we go to final questions?
Yeah, so I have an ebook right now that you can get. It's at drbrighten.com/natural child. And this one is all about, it's the 5 most common ailments that we see in babies and kids. So I made this ebook for moms to have a tool, because I think that moms should have more tools and feel less anxious about taking care of their child, because they totally have the means. So it's just things of like, what do you do with a fever, and when is a fever a problem? And also like colic. So you can pick up that ebook. As we were talking, I've written a book about some postpartum hormonal issues, which I'm finishing up, and then I don't really know when that one's going to come out just yet, but I am going to be releasing a book that will be in the fall, which is on how to care for your body in the first 6 weeks postpartum. So it's healing your body naturally, and just some really practical tips that I give to all my patients in my office, and things that I just feel like if every mom could have, she could really, really have a leg up in healing herself postpartum. I'm all just about getting patients to really own their health and take control of their lives, because I don't see my role as someone who is just here to, give you information and be like, always the go-to person. I see my role as I am your educator. I am here to help you understand and own your health, because I really believe that you should be able to care for yourself, and that I should be here when it's the basics aren't enough and you feel like you're getting stuck. So look for that book to come out. You can join my email list, which is on my website, which is drbrighten.com. I should say my last name's a little bit tricky. So my website is DR, and then it's BRIGHTEN. It's the EN that people always miss, but you can join my email list, and then people on my email list are going to be the first to know when the book comes out, and we'll definitely have some special promos for them on that.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, you're doing a great job, and so articulate, and your brain is on fire. So we want to know, Dr. Brighten, what's your morning routine? You're running a busy practice. You're doing a lot of online coaching, writing books. What's your first couple hours look like?
Okay, so I'm going to be totally honest and transparent because that's how I roll. So first thing, I wake up in the morning, my toddler still gets in bed with me. I take my thyroid. So I am on thyroid hormone, because I was a woman who experienced postpartum thyroiditis. And so that's my first thing I do. Then I cuddle in bed with my child, get my oxytocin flowing. And then I get up, and my focus, my son has started this new thing with, Mama, it's breakfast time. It's breakfast time. I always start my day with really good meal, like a really nutrient dense breakfast. So I try to aim for at least a whole bunch, like an entire bunch of kale or chard, having a really quality protein and fat, because I've got a lot going on in my day, and sometimes I don't know when I'm going to get lunch or what the rest of the day is going to look like, which I know sounds kind of awful, but that's part of being a doctor. And sometimes I got to just roll with the way the day is. So that's my number one priority, is making sure that I have a really good breakfast. And then if I take a shower, it all depends on how the toddler has gotten breakfast all over himself. I always end my showers in cold water. And that's something that just really, it reflexes the blood vessels, brings all the blood back into my core and just fires up my brain. And that's something that I really enjoy doing as well. And then I have a cup of coffee. And that is definitely part of my morning ritual. I don't care if it's caffeinated or decaf, but it's delicious. And so usually my husband is making coffee in the morning. And we just have this whole kind of family routine to start our day. And that's the biggest thing I'd say. My mornings aren't always consistent because some days I get to go to the gym, other days I don't, and I'm waiting till the evening or midday to do that. But always a really good breakfast, which, yeah, I know sounds kind of, as I say it, I'm like, I feel like I'm like cereal commercial, like start the day with a good breakfast. But I'm really like, my son knows, like, we're going to have a really nutrient dense breakfast every morning, because the other thing is he goes to preschool and I have no idea, like I send food, but I have no idea what's going to happen in the day. So like, as long as when he's at home, I can get this in.
I love it. That's fantastic. There's a lot of different opinions about, should you eat breakfast? Should you skip breakfast? Should you intermittent fast and all that? And, I think just from, my own perspective, and it sounds like your perspective as well, I think cognitively you're a lot more alert and aware of blood sugar balance, but there's a huge body of research that shows that breakfast eaters way less than non-breakfast eaters have better insulin sensitivity, have better, glucose homeostasis and mental functioning, and lose weight better. So I don't know. I think people should experiment with it. And if you really, you're losing weight and your energy's good and all that with this intermittent fasting thing, then fine, stick with it. But the biggest question I get, and the reason why I'm kind of making a big deal about this is about that. Should I eat breakfast or not? Should I skip it or not?
Yeah.
So anyway, you got to try it on, see if it fits, and then move on.
Yeah.
So great.
It's different for everyone.
Right. Absolutely. Okay. So if you were to pick one herb, nutrient, botanical, or food substance that you could only bring on a vacation and recommend all your patients, what would that be and why?
Oh my gosh. So I have to say, I kind of hate this question because I have such a hard time picking one. It's like, if you have PMS, I love Vitex. If you need progesterone, if you have stress and you're a mom, I might love rhodiola. But if you got one thing and I'm taking it on vacation, I think I would probably bring N-acetylcysteine with me. I think there's nothing that it doesn't do, it seems. But I really love NAC. I think that every time I read something about it, there's even more information that I find about, it's not just about glutathione, but it can actually, help with like your eyes and your tear production to fight microbes. And it's been really great in a lot of mental health issues. And if I'm going on vacation and I'm going to have a cocktail, NAC is definitely the way to go with my liver. When you asked that question, I was like, I don't want to pick one because I practice patient-centered medicine, which means that I don't treat diseases, I treat people. So it just really varies. If I'm going to go with NAC today, you ask me tomorrow, it would probably be different.
Could change. Yeah, I know. Mine changes all the time, but the purpose is just to encourage, kind of different schools of thought. And so everyone has a different opinion, which is pretty neat. So, all right. So final question here, Dr. Brighten. Again, this has been fantastic. I've learned a ton. I know our listeners are going to dig this, but if you could bump shoulders with Barack Obama or a future president, maybe the governor of California, and just share with them one lifestyle or health tip that you feel if they were to share with Americans would improve the health of America and also the world, what would that lifestyle or health tip be and why?
So if I was to bump shoulders with them, I think I'd be more inclined to get on a soapbox and talk about labeling of our food supply and being more transparent. I'm not happy with the fact that they're going to ship in meat from China and they're not going to tell us about it. I believe in the informed consent. I believe every consumer and every patient has the right to choose for themselves. I definitely believe in eating organic, supporting your local farmer. And I would say that if we could, my tip would be is make it accessible for everyone to get their food as close to home. So support the local farmers and make sure that everyone has access to high quality food. I think we have way too many food deserts in this country, places where there's only a convenience store for people to purchase food from. And how can we really turn the tables on health disparities and really change chronic disease if people can't even have access to something so fundamental as high quality fruits and vegetables and high quality meat? So, I think that I wouldn't let them go until they agreed that they were going to be transparent, label our food, and then work to get people better access to better food, because we can put as many clinics as we want into these areas that have a propensity to worse health outcomes, but people don't necessarily need more doctors. People need more access to the things that are their fundamental right, which is high quality food and clean water.
Right. Yeah. Fantastic information. And Mark Hyman had a Facebook thing, I think in May, and it said, there's junk and there is food, so.
Yes. I didn't see
Stop
that.
eating junk.
Look for that. That's so true. Because when we say junk food, that's something where I'm like, nothing in that is food. There's nothing in it that's food. And, I'm definitely a scientist at heart, and I love what we can do in science, but just because you can do it doesn't mean you should.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show, Dr. Brighten. I learned a ton. You really inspired me and a lot of people out there. So again, we'll post the show notes at highintensityhealth.com/105. So hope you have a great weekend.
Thanks. You too. Thanks for having me on. And I hope I really want to meet your wife. We were chatting on Instagram this morning, but I hope to run into you guys again soon.
We will. I'm sure we will in the future. So
yeah, awesome. Take care.
Thank you.